China has accused the U.S. president of spreading what it's called a political virus at the UN General Assembly after Donald Trump blamed Beijing for the coronavirus spread.
大事就联合国的发展给出中国方案，结合世界需要一个什么样的联合。
We have the most powerful military anywhere in the world.
China's ambassador to the UN, Zhang Jun, said U.S. rhetoric was incompatible with the general atmosphere of the General Assembly. That after Trump in his speech lashed out at Beijing over what he called the China virus. The U.S. president claimed that Beijing unleashed the plague on the world. He said China, at the start of the pandemic, shut down travel domestically but allowed flights abroad, allowing the disease to spread worldwide. Trump said the UN must hold Beijing accountable for the pandemic. And joining us now for this news review is Tony Gosling, investigative journalist from Bristol, and George Zamuli, senior research fellow from the Global Policy Institute, joining us from Budapest. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you both to the program. I guess we'll start there in Budapest with you, George. Welcome to the program. Your thoughts on especially Donald Trump's continued allegations that the Chinese, to some point, were actually blatantly, negligent in getting this virus out to the rest of the planet.
Well, there was much that was offensive and absurd about Trump's address to the General Assembly today. However, on this issue of the COVID virus, Trump does have a point. All of the evidence indicates that the virus originated in China, and frankly, there hasn't really been a proper accounting by China as to the origin of the virus, what it did to address the virus when it became aware of it, and what it did to prevent the spread of the virus to the rest of the world. So when Trump says that really the rest of the world has really suffered as a result of this virus, he's right. I mean, we can't really go on every 10 years having these terrible pandemics. I mean, remember, this is the second pandemic that originated from China. And something has to be done about it. I mean, the U.S. economy, the European economy, the global economy has suffered terribly as a result of this. And there has to be some reckoning about this. So on this issue, I think Trump has a point. Now, on the rest of it, about what he said about Iran and what he said about how wonderfully the United States is doing, no, that is, of course, all nonsense. But just on this narrow issue of the virus, I think Trump has a point, and China does have issues that it needs to address.
Thank you, George. And Tony, welcome to the program. Tony, the point is Donald Trump's very crafty, even when he does make allegations at whatever a governmental body it is, or global body it is. In this situation, to George's point, to agree, he can blame the Chinese for dropping the ball when it comes to certain things. But there's a fine line where the Chinese negligence stops and Donald Trump's incompetence kicks in. He wants to blame the Chinese for all of his own misgivings as well. Your thoughts, please.
Well, look, the United States, in the persona of Donald Trump, is getting quite good at picking fights it can't win. Now, if Trump really wants to go there as to the origins of this virus, yes, he's quite right. It looks as if the geographical origin was Wuhan in China, but he's neglecting to look at the potential here for this being a bioweapon, first of all, and that as an origin is a very important thing that the world's press has been looking at. And much of the Western press has been wanting to bury that idea. And also the fact that the US Army was over in Wuhan in October and November 2019, just so happened to be hanging around at the World Military Games there. So there is quite a possibility that the virus was left behind deliberately by the United States, and that it wasn't cooked up in a Wuhan lab at all, that it could possibly have been made over in, if it was a bioweapon indeed, it could have been made at one of the US facilities around the world, which people like Dilyana Gatasheva, the Bulgarian investigative journalist, has discovered a whole network of these so-called civilian military biolabs funded by the Pentagon around the world. So it could be US, it could even be British, I ought to say, as someone that worked as a reporter for the BBC in Salisbury, which was where the British biological weapons base was, which, by the way, spent decades looking into the common cold at a place called the Common Cold Research Centre, and that's Porton Down, just near Salisbury in Wiltshire. So this virus could possibly have been just simply brought over by the US Army and left to hang around. So if you really want to go there, Donald Trump, we need to look at whether or not this was a military virus, a bioweapon or not, because the effect has been absolutely enormous. Not only is the idea here that we can supposedly accuse China of being irresponsible. I do think, though, that nobody is really going to blame anybody for this spreading around the world. It was inevitable that it was going to happen. The idea that Trump is blaming Xi and the Chinese for doing this, or, as we're starting to see, President Xi, very unwisely, I think, going the other way around and starting to blame Donald Trump for spreading the virus and the Americans for spreading the virus. This blame game is going to take us nowhere. But we really, I think, need to look into the actual origins. And the indications are it's just as likely to have been the United States that left this behind in Wuhan at the World Military Games as it is to have been the Chinese. So interesting to see Trump bringing this up. But I don't think it'll stick, personally. That's what I mean about the US picking fights it can't win.
And George, Donald Trump now says he wants the UN to hold Beijing accountable for the pandemic. 200,000 Americans dead and counting, 6.8 million infected. What does he want the UN to do to Beijing at this point? Or what can the UN do to Beijing at this point?
Well, that's a very good point, because China is, of course, a permanent member of the UN Security Council. So even if there were to be a vote within the UN Security Council to hold some kind of an international investigation as to the origin of the virus, and I think there should be an international investigation, I don't know that very much can happen, because China will undoubtedly veto any resolution from the UN Security Council to hold an international investigation. But there should be. And this has been a very serious pandemic. I mean, the sheer loss of life, as you point out, the economic calamity that has occurred in so many countries, and there has to be an investigation. I mean, are we going to have another one, another pandemic in 10 years, maybe in 5 years? I mean, the world can't go on like this, and there has to be some sort of a reckoning for this. So, but in practical terms, probably nothing much can happen, since China does wield a veto in the Security Council.
Thank you. And Tony, your final thoughts, please.
Well, look, I think President Xi is in a very strong position now. He could tell the truth and shame the devil with the United States. If he was to end his social credit system, start treating all Chinese citizens equally, and allow and even encourage dissent, so actually not to try and have a kind of one-party system. At least you can have one party, but to allow people to have different opinions without clamping down on dissenters in China, he would find, I believe, many people in the world starting to pat him on the back and saying, well, actually, you now really are taking over the mantle of the free world from the United States. As the United States starts to, I mean, it's been doing this for many years now by following the Israeli diktats, basically. But as the Chinese could take over from the Americans, as they start to shoot themselves in the foot internationally and start to become international pariahs because of their foreign policy, the Chinese could cash in on that if President Xi is brave enough.
All right, gentlemen, good stuff. Thank you both for tuning in and joining us here. Tony Gosling, they're out of Bristol, and Mr. George Zamuli joining us from Budapest. And viewers, that's a wrap for this segment of your Press TV's News Review. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.
Thank you.
You bet.